Radio 1 Berlin.
Welcome to the Time Travel Show here at Radio 1 Berlin, and today we meet Ralph, Harvey and myself in seafront Brighton, UK, many, many years ago for a legendary Radio 4A broadcast.
Hello and welcome to Radio 4A 101.4 FM. For the next hour we have the Test Guide Hour, and we're very pleased tonight to have as our very special guest Ralph Harvey, who I can say is Britain's leading pagan exorcist. Is that?
I think, Frank, that's a little bit flattering.
Right.
A leading exorcist, if you like.
Britain's leading exorcist, and what a fantastic night it is, as there's a massive full moon outside.
What you might call the witching hour.
Yeah, indeed. We're very close to the witching hour. It's 10 o'clock, 10:05, I think. And what I'd like to sort of talk to you about first, Ralph, is your history.
Right.
So can you tell me something about where you came from?
Where I came from, my mother's womb, in actual fact. No, I was born in Kensington in London in 1928, which now gives my age away, which makes me damn close on 75.
Right. And your parents, where were they from?
My parents, they were also born in England. To be quite honest, I'm not quite certain. One was born, I know my father was born in Paddington, my mother Equa was born in Kensington.
Right.
That's all really I can sort of say about that.
Right. And what did they do?
What did they do?
Yeah.
My father was a leading leather worker. He was a saddler by trade. He made saddles for Her Majesty the Queen. He made the Queen's handbags, all the Queen's luggage. He was a very, very skilled leather worker, most beautiful craftsman leather you'd ever seen. In fact, there was a magazine many years ago called Lilith, which ran a whole section just on his background and his life and some of the beautiful things he had created. Mm-hmm. He was regarded as one of the 10 craftsmen in England. One was a leather worker, one was a cricket bat maker, the other was Greener and Purdy, who made shotguns, and the other was Greenheart, who made fishing rods, and he was listed in the top 10 of artisans in this country.
Right. And what sort of beliefs did your parents have?
They were both. My father was quite a strict Christian, but not a fanatic by any means. My mother was a Christian, but as the years go by, she definitely got less enamored, shall we say, of Christianity. And when she used to read of terrible things and happenings around the world, many a time I remember her getting very angry, saying, "God, why do you let these things happen?" When we saw the massacre in Armenia and things like that, and she used to get really upset, and I think that she started to doubt her own faith in the end. But she was born a Christian, she died a Christian, and my father was born a Christian and died. My father was more fervent, but he was not one who rammed it down your throat. I wasn't. I sent to Sunday school when I was a child, but I never had Christianity rammed down upon me. Mm-hmm. So they were very fair, very fair.
Mm. So, and then you went into the army after school, presumably?
No, I went. First of all, I studied at Royal Veterinary College in London. That was during the war. I worked for Pharmaceutical Society also during the war, and it wasn't until 1947 when I was conscripted, and I didn't go into the army, I went into the RAF. And I served in Saudi Arabia, attached to the 4001st Armoured Car Flight, which was in actual fact the Aden Protectorate Levers RAF regiment, and I was RAF attached to the RAF regiment and the Aden Protectorate Levers.
Right. And how did you get involved in the occult in the first place then?
That started, I suppose, during the war years. I had always been terribly interested in hauntings, going to haunted places as a child and being to my mother, "Don't go there, it's dangerous," etc. I think it was during the war when we were very, very short of food, and I had a natural aptitude for hunting. And I used to supplement our larder in those days by going out originally with catapult and eventually with a 410 shotgun. And I used to bring back bunnies, etc. with my mum. And we supplemented all for the neighbours. I also get me a rabbit tuna, get me a pheasant. I used to do this. And I found when I went into the woods that I had an instinct that I just knew where my quarry was. I could come to a crest of a hill and sometimes I'd go up the companion and I'd say, 2 rabbits over there. He'd say, "But there's nothing there." And I say, "Well, I just know there is." and I was always right. And I realized I had this sort of extrasensory perception that I could, rather like an instinct in primitive man. And during the war years, I kept the pot well filled for myself and local neighbours.
So, had you had experiences like this as a child then?
I had many experiences like this, but it wasn't until I used to go around the gypsy encampment, which was an old Roman encampment, down a place called Scars Lane in Tilehurst. There was the old Romans used to camp in the old days. That's going back in the mid-40s, about 42, 43, before I was conscripted into the services. And the gypsies there are very, very wary at first, I think, as one from an outsider. And eventually they got to know me and to trust me, and they used to teach me to poach as well. You know, how to poach a rabbit with one hand high, a hare 2 hands high, and I learned a lot from them, all sorts of other skills, and herbalism as well. And I was very, very interested in them. My mother, again, did not like me going near the gypsy encampment, but I was always in trouble. And I spent most of my leisure time was spent studying nature in the woodlands. I was a very, very keen naturalist.
So had you had any experiences of haunted houses as a child then?
Yes, I had, but it was really and truly when I came out of the services that it really started. I'd had one there, I remember there's one, again, unfortunately I can't remember the location of it as the years go by. I remember one that was a shop at the bottom of near Kentwood Estate, and that was very, very badly haunted. And I remember going in there as a child and people being frightened. But there's a whole range of odd phenomena over many years. But it wasn't until I came out of the RAF when I was demobbed in 1949 that it really started in earnest.
So when you were in the was it the RAF?
I was in the RAF. Yes.
In the RAF, you got involved in paganism then?
Well, when I was in the RAF, I was actually there was an actual fact a gypsy girl. By coincidence, nothing to do with the gypsies I'd known before. There was a gypsy girl who was also conscripted, because conscription went right across the whole range of people. And I got very, very close to her during my training days, and for probably something like 9 months before I was actually sent abroad. I was sent out to Saudi Arabia. And during that 9 months, I mean, I found her fascinating, and it led me to a completely different outlook, I think, on religion as a whole. And I think in the RAF, I became more and more disillusioned with Christianity as time went on. And we were sometimes compulsory church parades, where we really had, sometimes we had, regardless of our denomination, I think this is what upset me, regardless of our denomination, we were told, oh, we need 30 men for the service, and you just went. Didn't matter whether you were Jew or Gentile, you know, you had to go. And we had one very obnoxious Catholic priest who really, really was an obnoxious. I can't say it on air, but it begins with B and it ends with D, and I hated him.
Oh right. And you were saying earlier that you started your own sort of organisation. In
1949, I was demobbed, and in 1950. I realised that all the years, 3 years I was in nearly, that I really wanted to get out of the service. I was missing it very much, strange enough, than companionship. And some after that, I rejoined the Terriers. But in 1951, after the repeal of the Witchcraft Act, I had started studying ritual magic by then, and I was very, very involved in that, but very, very amateur at it. Very, very amateur. I mean, I was a very, very young man, and in my 21 to 22 years old. And I was studying intently everything I could find on the subject. I say about there was the repeal of the Witchcraft Act, and about a year, I'm trying to remember the exact dates now, about 1 year after, about 1952, I started a group called the Free Thinkers. And I was at that time with a lot of university students that said, could you guys put your religion out of your mind? You know, Jeff, can you forget that you're a Muslim? You know, can you forget you're a Buddhist? Can you forget that you're Jewish? You know, can you forget you're Presbyterian, that you're Church of England, you're Catholic? And really have a discussion and not be influenced by what you were in years gone by. And in other words, don't be influenced by what you were brought up as. And we decided we would clear our minds and we would evaluate every religion that we were taught constructively. So and could we do this for a whole year? Could we get 52 speakers over 52 weeks? And it was strangely much easier than we thought. We had Baptists, Anabaptists, Brethren, Exclusive Brethren, Plymouth Brethren, Jehovah's Witnesses, Presbyterians. It was just amazing. Foursquare Gospelers. We had Jewish, we had Muslims, we had Buddhists. It was surprisingly easy. We even had Zoroastrians, Shintoists from Japan. They all lectured, and each one would expound as to why they were right and all the other religions were wrong. And at the end of each meeting, we used to listen to the priest or whoever was lecturing very carefully, and they were very convincing in their arguments. And at the end of the evening, we would all take a vote, and 9 times out of 10, the majority of us all vote say, hallelujah, we're all Baptists. Until we listened to the Presbyterian, which came said, next week, hallelujah, we're all Presbyterians. Until we listened to the Church of England, and so it went on, we're all Jewish, and eventually I always remember one very amusing incident, that it was when I think we had the Jewish rabbi. The Jewish rabbi came along, and one of the questions we put to him was, why do we need a mediator to get to God? You can only get to God through Christ, you see. And the Jew said, nonsense, you don't need a mediator at all. You go straight to Jehovah. We do not have an intermediary. And this made a lot of sense to us. And I think at the end of that meeting we said, hallelujah, we're all we're all Jewish now. And then the following week I think we had the Muslim. And he said, no. The rabbi has got it completely wrong. You do need a mediator. But where you're going wrong, you've got to be through Muhammad to Allah. Well, you can imagine this went on for month after month after month. At the end of it, quite honestly, we ended up as religious schizophrenics. Right. So everything was very convincing. So I didn't follow the path that I eventually took just haphazardly. And at the end of it, there was only 2 faiths that made any sense to me. One was the Baha'i faith, which I found was a very beautiful faith, and I liked it very much indeed. I never ever met a bad Baha'i. Every Baha'i practiced what they preached. They were lovely people, and I was very impressed with them.
What is the Baha'i faith?
The Baha'i faith is it's a study of Baha'u'llah, a man who was called the Bab. They believe in progressive revelation, that the gods send people into the earth every so many years, that after Christ came Muhammad, after that came Zoroaster, etc. In other words, it was progression, and then in the 1920s that they supposed to send Al-Bab or Baha'u'llah. And we liked it, but there was 1 or 2 aspects that wasn't quite for me. And I think by that time there was a lot of talk of the renaissance of paganism and witchcraft, and the old religion, the study of all things beautiful in nature. And that, I think, is what hooked me and set me on the pagan path.
So what is paganism? How would you describe it?
Paganism, I see, basically is really a love of beauty, of nature, the reverence of womanhood, the acknowledgement of the Earth Mother, the recognize that both God and Goddess, work in conjunction with each other. There's a polarity between the sexes. But I think it is a beautiful religion of all things green, everything that is pagan, that is all things green and associated with nature. And I think that was the great attraction. But now, going back from the 1950s, 50 years on, with ecology and the green movement, of course, our religion's coming to its own.
So what's the difference? How would you say that was involved with witchcraft then?
No, all witches are pagans, but not all pagans are witches.
Right. So can you explain what is witchcraft?
Witchcraft is where you adhere strictly to the old ways. There are tenets of the Wiccan faith, as we call it, sometimes known as the hidden children of the goddess. Witches are pagans who behave strictly in nature. They follow all the natural paths of nature. They worship essentially a goddess, the seasons of the year, the passing of the seasons. Womanhood, is, as far as the Earth Mother is the central figure in the form of Kollman. The god is the Lord Carnunus, who of course is the original horned god, who was later deified by the Christians and identified as the devil. Of course, one thing I'd like to emphasize is that witches do not believe in the devil. We're always accused of it. We do not believe in the existence of the devil. We're fully aware of the existence of evil in the world, but to be personified in a humanoid form with forked tail and horns, the answer is no.
Right. So so there is no devil as far as you can say?
There is no devil. No.
Right.
The devil is an invention of the Christian church, invented to keep Christians in line. And for hundreds of years, probably right up to the turn of the 19th century, it really did work. If you don't do as you're told, the devil will get you. Only the church can save you. It was a big stick that they kept the populace and the peasantry in line with. And people really were afraid of going to hell. I mean, now in a more enlightened age, we're no longer afraid of that. But the devil was a very, very real entity to the early Christians.
So, how would you define what the occult was?
Well, the very word occult means secret or the esoteric. In other words, it's the beyond the expanse of ordinary knowledge is the word, literally the meaning of the word occult. It's the unknown. The occult of that, as in the more literal sense, shall we say now, is the study of all things of the esoteric, things to do with the unknown, spiritual, ethereal, etc. That is the occult. It is the study of unknown forces.
Right. And exorcism comes under that banner.
Exorcism, yes, I think you could say exorcism came under that banner.
So how did you first get involved in exorcism?
My first study of that, I think, was for studying what I say from my early days before entering the craft, when I studied ritual magic. And I was very, very interested in magic of Abramelin the Mage, as it was known. I studied the works of Edric Shah. In fact, I studied a lot of the great masters there. And I think it was the Mage, actually, who led me into rituals that eventually started me as an exorcist. Although I'd like to clarify one thing. Although over the years I have gained a reputation as an exorcist, I only use exorcism as a very, very last resort. When I am called to a manifestation that outwardly, shall we say, outwardly is evil, I would much sooner try to communicate with the entity behind the manifestation and see if there's a raison d'etre, a reason behind it, and only if I found it is inherently evil will I then perform an exorcism. I find with a large percentage of cases that you're probably ending up with an earthbound spirit. Sometimes they don't even realize they're dead. They are not evil. They can be mischievous. They're not harmful. None of them are harmful. But if it is something inherently evil, which I have come across, then that is when it's like bell, book and candle time at full exorcism.
What's bell, book and candle then?
Oh, that's a Christian expression.
Right.
They used to go in with a Bible, a bell, and a candle and cast the devil out. Right. And I mean, the number of times I can tell you over the years, Adrian, that I have been called in to clear up after Christians have gone with bell, book and candle and failed. And then they say, well, send for Ralph.
Right, wow. So you're quite famous then among
No, not famous. Not famous, certainly not.
So,
well known, shall we say.
Well known, right, yeah. So can you remember your first exorcism that you performed?
No, to be quite honest, no, I don't. It's many years over the years.
A notable exorcism then?
A notable one? Strange enough, my most notable ones although I have travelled the length and breadth of England, I've done them abroad as well. My most notable one, strange enough, has been in Sussex. And there's one I used to call the Sussex Triangle, which spread from Lancing to Sompting to Shoreham. And some of the most notable ones all took place within that triangle. One of the worst ones I ever had was an amazing one, actually took place in Shoreham many years ago. Sompting one was a particularly evil one there, which is far too complex to go into. But if you like, I'll recount one too if you wish. I was living at home at the time, and I received a phone call, and I was not at all a happy bunny, being dragged out of bed about 2 o'clock in the morning from a gentleman who was known to me quite well, inasmuch as my son was working with him and was a lodger in his house. So I knew that if my son was there and this gentleman, Vernon, his name was, Vernon had called me, then I knew that this was a genuine sort of poltergeist activity, as it seemed outwardly. And they said there things are happening around the house, things were being thrown around. And I said, okay, but I can't come immediately. I've got to prepare holy water. There's a number of things I have to do before I can come. And I said, but I will be there as quickly as I can. Now, when you're analysing psychic phenomena, of course, you can never rule out coincidence. But sometimes coincidence goes beyond the realms of possibility. And you have to say, there's got to be an occult or malign influence here. On this particular occasion, I jumped into my car, putting aboard ritual swords, remember, everything that is the paraphernalia, which is quite large with swords and stangs, which is like large staves, and off I went down, straight away down to Hove Seafront. I got onto Hove Seafront, turned right, and bang, car just packed in, and my brake cable had snapped. Wow. I've never known a brake cable snap. Can drift if you like, but never snap. And I just drifted to the side of the road, and there I am stuck on this way to this exorcism. But fortunately, the seafront at home there's plenty of taxis backwards and forwards, and we didn't have mobile phones in those days. So anyway, along came a taxi, and I hailed him. He said, "What's wrong, mate?" I told him I was trying to get through to Shoreham. So we put all my apparatus into the car, and I've got some very strange looks from this taxi driver, and we set off. Well, we hadn't got a half a mile to the bottom of, I think it was Boundary Road. There was a public house there. Always remember it, called the Halfway House. And we got to the Halfway House, and bang, taxi came to a standstill and came to the side of the road and stopped. Got out, his brake cable had snapped. And no, sorry, I apologize, I'm wrong. Accelerator cable. The accelerator cable. It was my accelerator, not brake. Accelerator cable had snapped, and his accelerator cable snapped. By now, he is now a bit of a worried bunny himself. He said, "This is bloody unusual, to say the least." So anyway, he being on radio mics, he called up another taxi, and there was a bit of a hushed conversation. So I've got an oddball here, His accelerator cable snapped, and mine's bloody well snapped as well. Excuse me, swearing over the air.
Oh, this is Radio 4A. We can say anything on Radio 4A. We have total control of the airwaves.
And anyway, a long taxi came, and we put everything into his boot and loaded it into the back seat. And we were a bit quiet, and we went off. But we got outside of Shoreham to just a place called the Lighthouse. And just as we were approaching the lighthouse, which is on the left-hand side, facing the sea at Shoreham, bang, his accelerator cable snapped. Wow. Now, 3 in a row, they now have got very, very superstitious. The next thing is now I'm unceremoniously dumped by the side of the road with all my apparatus. I still have a good mile and a half to go into Shoreham High Street, probably it's got 2 miles to go. And there I am, and this taxi is also stranded. Well, about 10 minutes later, another taxi comes along, hooks a tow rope up to the other taxi and takes him off. And I said, will you send another taxi for me? And he said, I don't think anybody would come out, mate. He said, the airways are humming about you. He said, I don't think you're going to get a taxi. And I said, well, no, it is my right as a taxi. He said, well, but nobody will come. So, being a busy thoroughfare, they went off. I was very, very unhappy over this. Taxis came, they slowed up. We've heard about you, and off the accelerator. Well, after a while, the taxi came down, tried to flag it again, and it slowed down. I said, oh, thank you. He said, I'm not picking you up. He said, I'm not picking you up. He said, we've got a fellow, he said, who's a taxi driver, Jehovah's Witness. And he's not afraid of anything. He says, he'll pick you up. Okay. So I said, thank you very much. So, a few minutes later, along came this taxi with a man who I will never forget until my dying day. He was about 5 foot high, about 5 foot wide. He was the shortest, fattest little man I'd ever seen. Delightful fellow. And he said to me, he said, I do not want you, no trouble you have tonight, he said. But he said, if it is to do with the devil, he said, with God on my side and Christ as my Savior, we will combat this together. So I said, thank you very much. I'll take all the help I can get on this one. So with that, we put everything into his taxi and nothing further happened. Well, we pulled up with this road in Shoreham. And as I got out, I started unloading all of my stuff. This taxi driver jumped out of the cab and he had the most enormous Bible I'd ever seen. It was one of these tomes with leather thing that was on the family, you know, the great leather ones you've probably seen them, about 100 years old or more. Great Victorian thing, all the births and deaths of the family. And he opens it as a certain section there. And he puts his hand on the dashboard and he pulls out this enormous crucifix, which was, I always remember, it was an ebony with silver edges to it and a silver Christ on it. And this very, very large one, about a foot high, and this book cradled across his arm. He goes into the house, there's crowds of people in the street, everything, and there's thumbs and bang, and we're saying, what's going on in there? So along goes this priest. He goes there, you know, I advance you, I cast you out in the name of the Lord Jesus, etc. He goes, and there was one almighty smash. And a chest of drawers came straight down the stairs at him, hit the banister, split into 1,000 pieces. The last we saw of him was running up the path, opened the taxi door, threw the spike in, threw the shit across him, jumped it and shot off like the very devil was after him, and we never saw him again. Wow. And we spent all that night on that exorcism and failed. Right. And we had to go round back there for 2 days in a row before we actually subdued it. Right. It was a very bad manifestation. Yeah. But it was memorable to me, I think, over the taxi drive that was going to help and seeing him subdued.
So how do you subdue a spirit or a ghost?
You have to, every haunting, every manifestation is different. I mean, if there was one, you can use holy water and slowly drive them back towards a specific entrance. You can actually incarcerate them, you can imprison them. You can then put salt out, but I don't want to go into details over radio in case anybody tries a amateur do-it-yourself kind of job. We have consecrated tools, consecrated swords, which have been power charged. We have certain other ritual implements which are power charged, and basically then you have to make barriers of salt, holy water, which we create holy water ourselves with our own specific Wiccan ways, and the holy water is created, and and eventually you drive the entity toward a section by which you think you can banish it into what we call the ether, or send it back from whence it came. But each case is different. There is no set routine. You have to judge each one accordingly.
So you think there's not a logical sort of apparition?
Oh no! You see, there are different types of apparition. Poltergeists are nothing more than balls of energy. They're just literally energy, throw things around, make a lot of noise, tremendous fracas. But they're not usually sort of spirit forces, they're an energy force. And you will always find that when you have a poltergeist activity, there is always a child going through the pangs of puberty, an 11-year-old girl, an 11-year-old boy in prepubescence. It's always associated. There's you can always say, is this a genuine one? You've got to look for an undeveloped mind. And if you find the undeveloped mind or an undeveloped body of a child, that is where the harness is upon that child, usually between the age of 10 to 12.
Do you find that quite often, though?
Quite often. No, not too often, every time. It's an absolute infallible rule for poltergeists. As far as this, as ordinary hauntings and spirits are concerned, they're disembodied spirits who are earthbound. Sometimes they make it quite clear, we don't want to pass over, we don't want to go on. If they do want to go on, then we will help them over to the other side. But many, many times they're quite happy to remain on earth, and have probably made themselves not exactly a nuisance of themselves. They've attached themselves to a house, because you get an example, a dear old lady, she's born into a house, her mother dies, she inherits the house, she gets married, her husband left, and she dies at the age of 98, and she spent her entire life in a little cottage, or a little terrace. And when she passes over, she doesn't leave that little cottage. Then she suddenly realized newcomers, in comes a young couple, and they put different decor. They ripped a lovely stove out that she loved, this wooden filed one. They put a new range on. They've decorated it colours she doesn't like, and she gets resentful. These are people, intruders in my house, and she makes it felt, but she's not harmful. Eventually you placate her, and 9 times out of 10 you must get the couple to live with it and accept her. But if you get people very scary, who really hate manifestations, it's a different ballgame.
Right.
But then you'd have to try and persuade them to pass on from that point.
So what's the most scary sort of exorcism you've ever done?
Well, I think, quite honestly, I say the Shoreham one was one of the scariest ones there. The worst one I ever had was at something, and that is so complex to go into details, it would take ages. But the worst one I think I ever experienced was at something, and that was pure evil there. But most of them are fairly straightforward. It's very rare. Mind you, something is one of the few areas where black magic is practiced as well, in Sussex. We find there's a lot of talk of black magic, and 9 times out of 10, it's completely and utterly false. It's just people playing with the occult and playing wrongly. But there has always been one group in something area who have been evil, and there's been a great deal of phenomena has centered around that particular location.
So you're saying that places that are where people have practiced sort of ritual,
have like a dark emanation around that area. Yes,
is that an energy then?
It is a latent energy that adheres to that.
Right.
And there's an area in something which is bound in, but you could say the ground is soaked in blood. There's a small section there where I think that the Romans massacred the Celts, and then prisoners the Danes raided it and burned it and slaughtered everybody, and the Vikings slaughtered it. It's got bad history of bad vibrations all around it.
So have you actually seen the ghost?
Or seen more than one, many of the years.
Right, and what do they look like?
Strangely enough, the average ghost the average was using the word ghost in a light-hearted way, probably looks quite ordinary. It's not a see-through character or somebody walking along with its head tucked underneath its arm. They often appear as quite ordinary people. Quite ordinary people. We had the experience only a few weeks ago, coming back from Crawley Down, and we passed a man standing by the side of the road, very grey man, and as I passed him I just instinctively knew he was a ghost, and my wife says it's a bad habit I have of giving hitchhikers a lift, and it looked like the man wanted a lift, and I didn't slow down, I drove straight on, and my wife said, thank God for that, I thought you were going to pick him up. She said, there was something about that. She said, was that a ghost? I said, absolutely certain that it was a ghost. Well, in the Fort New Haven military display team I belong to, one of the soldiers in the team, in actual fact, lives in that area. And I mentioned to him in passing, and he said, oh no, he said, that's a well-known phenomenon. He stands there, he said, most people boycott it at night time. So we then knew it was a manifestation. But they quite often look like quite ordinary people. There's none of this ghostly stuff jumping out and taking boot and things like that. It doesn't happen.
With Ouija boards, is that a way that people sort of end up manifesting ghosts?
I'd like to take this broadcast as a platform to say, for God's sake, whatever you do not ever touch a Ouija board. A Ouija board is one of the few things that will conjure up an evil entity. It can appear to you as something very, very benign, be very friendly, give you a lot of good information, and wheedle its way into you. They are very, very dangerous. I cannot emphasize the dangers of the Ouija board. Do not touch them. We've all burned our fingers with them. In a learning curve when I was a young man, do not touch them. I would like to emphasize, if you want to conjure evil entities that will influence you and influence your life, then touch a Ouija board.
Right.
They are inherently evil.
So have you had experiences of Ouija boards then when you were younger?
Lots of times when I've been called into manifestations, it's all started with somebody playing with a Ouija board. I cannot emphasize it enough.
And how does it affect people then?
Usually by giving false information. They start off and they will tell you things that are probably only known to yourself and your parents and your immediate family. And then they will start sort of feeding you information. I mean, let's take a hypothetical case and saying, you know your brother's having an affair with your wife, you know it, and things like this, and start sowing evil into a person's head. They cause disruption, they cause mayhem. Do not listen to what anything spells out. And a lot of stuff also on Ouija boards is nothing more than somebody, particularly twisted person, pushing the glass around. But if you get the glass raised up by itself and moves around, you have actually brought something into the house. If you're touching it, if you're touching a glass on a Ouija board, then the whole process is suspect. But if you see the glass raises up and starts going without any physical activity, nobody's touching it, you have conjured something, and now you have trouble.
So in your experience as an exorcist, you've seen objects actually lifting off the ground and moving?
Oh yes, I mean, one of my studies in actual fact, I mean, I think the 3 studies I did was particularly telepathy, teleportation and telekinesis. And telekinetic manifestation by mind power moving things is part of the study also of ritual magic. But it's certainly when you find that force is unleashed, when the force is unleashed, then things will move of their own accord. Often, long after you've ceased the actual ritual, you'll find things where people, in ritual magic, if it's not grounded, the energy is still in the air and things will still move around.
Right. Have you ever been sort of followed by a spirit that you've actually tried exorcising from a building? Nothing
like that. No, the only spirit I think we've ever had sort of attach itself to us was when we lived in Reading. And we had a very benign presence that absolutely adored children. And when we moved house, it came with us. And everywhere we came, it attached itself to us. But it's very, very benign.
How do you view the process of death? What do you think happens?
The process of death, I mean, I suppose until one dies, one cannot really guarantee exactly what the process of death is. We know very much the tunnel effect, that death is very much like unto birth. Going through a tunnel until you emerge the other side. And it's what we call entering that into the summerlands. But we have found that immediately after death, depending on the method of death, if a person has a violent or terrible death, say a person died in a concentration camp, they go into like a convalescent period before they enter into the summerlands, or what the Christians might call their heaven as such. But this is a period of which you stay there for a period of time. It could be anything until you're reincarnated. It could be anything from 1 to 20 years. Very rarely goes much beyond 80 years before that person is reincarnated back into society. When they go in, if you can imagine a difficult death is the same as a difficult birth. So a baby is born, it has difficulties, it goes into an incubator. The baby can be in that incubator for 8, 9, 10 days before it is now passed into this world as such to the mother. The same as with death, a very difficult death, you go through an incubatory period and you are made whole before you pass on from there.
So you have no fear of death?
No fear at all.
Right.
No, in fact, I think to me, it is the final adventure.
Do you think that when you die, you're greeted by anybody?
I can't tell you that, I don't know.
No, it's true.
I'll tell you what I'll do though. I'll try and communicate with you when I do pass this world.
Thank you. Yes, maybe if you make it during the day rather than at night, because I tend to get more scared at night.
I see, I'll see what I can do.
So you believe in reincarnation then?
Yes, I do, in actual fact, I mean, on a serious note, I do believe that there are helpers that come to greet people, that people, somebody you've known. And from what literature, remember, you see, as Wiccans, we're not allowed to communicate with the dead. This is against our ways. Right. But we're only allowed on one day a year in which we can invite the dead. That is on the Halloween Sabbath, which these Christians call Halloween. On that Sabbath, of course, then we can invite the dead to return and to receive messages. But we do not raise the dead, we do not invoke them, we don't believe it. We're not spiritualists talking to the dead.
So have you ever had a regression you sort of seeing what you were, who you were in a past life?
Regression, I mean, is one of our, what we call our fun evenings,
Ah.
when we get people to try and go back into what they've been in past
Right.
lives.
So, do you know what lives you had before?
Yes, I've had some lives which have been inexplicable. Because you see, when you do a regression, you land yourself in a particular period, only for a matter of a few minutes perhaps of that period, and you cannot always identify exactly where you are or what you were. I remember one particular regression when I remember being in a boat with people in a very, very bad condition, a long boat, and people were in a terrible, terrible state, and we were drifting towards land, and I was very, very weak, and I suddenly realized as we saw the land coming up that we had sort of made it to safety. It was a very explicit part of my life, but I do not know where it was. All I know, it was a boat and it was at sea. I remember when on a previous death in 1907, I was reborn in 1928, which gives roughly the reincarnatory period, and that was killed at the Crystal Palace in London. I'm still here in a train crash.
So do you think that the people that you meet in life are connected with people from past lives?
Oh yes, you'll find that life, it's very, on air you cannot, because you need to demonstrate it by sort of with a paper and pen, so it's very, very difficult to do that. If you can imagine you're the centre of a circle, you're the centre of a circle, and all around you are other circles. In other words, you have a circle around you, and your wife has one around her. Can you excuse me a moment? I've just got a thick throat. I won't be a moment.
You're listening to Radio 4A 101.4 FM. If you want to visit us on the web, it's www.radio4a.org.uk, and tonight we're listening to Ralph Harvey, Britain's leading pagan exorcist. This is Testcard. If you want to visit the Testcard website, it's www.testcard.org, or email us at testcard@rocketmail.com. And we're just going to continue for the next quarter of an hour with Ralph.
Right, so clear my throat now.
Okay, so we were talking about kind of regressions and past lives. So as far as regressions are concerned, how is it possible to get someone to sort of see a past life?
Well, there are a number of methods. The method that is particularly favoured by the Coven is what we call the Christus method, by which there is a massage in what we call the third eye. It's done by a gentle massaging of the ankles until the person is put into a semi-hypnotic state. Then you have to literally lift the body, the soul force out of the body, and raise them up until, shall we say, the soul force is on the ceiling. Turn them around, they can look down and actually see their body laying on the ground. At that point, we'll probably test them by sending them somewhere with a degree of control. Might say, well, will you go down the road, and will you look at the house with the green gate, and go up to the front door and tell me what you see, and they say the one of the window panes is cracked, and you know they have that. You can send them down further, and they will describe things to you, and then you have control. You send them up into space, and then when they have reached a certain apex, they are brought down, and they come down at a point in time, and then they have to describe. I think that when you have and I call what I say is true regression, 9 out of 10 people are appalled to find the situations they find themselves in. We find girls that suddenly realize that their hair isn't permed, that they go to wash and they have no soap, there is no electric lights. They probably find an oil lamp, or just an ordinary lamp lit with say tallow and fat, or candles only. So they realise their fingernails are broken, they're not manicured, they're unkempt. They find they work in the field, they haven't got proper shoes. And I find women react particularly, oh my God, what awful sort of way of life it was. So used to switching lights on when you go in, having toilets as an example, having washing facilities with warm water to the touch, and find themselves instead in a primitive kitchen, scouring out old clay pots with a handful of sand and cold water, cleaning things. Then you know you have a regression.
Yeah.
And then you don't find that you'll say, I was the Queen of Sheba, or, you know, I was William Tell in a previous life. You suddenly find that you were very low-born, peasant type, and the chances of you being highborn or something notable in history, well, to schizophrenics, I'm afraid, do just imagination.
So as far as, if we go back to sort of ritual, talking about ritual magic, how do you define ritual magic?
Well, ritual magic, I mean, has to be very, very specific and exacting geometrically, as against Wiccan, in which the whole basis of witchcraft and of Wiccan magic is that the intent is all important. So in other words, if I make a mistake in ritual, provided the intent is clear, it doesn't matter. If somebody misses a word out, puts a wrong word in wrongly, if the circle is not, I won't give the dimensions of a circle, if the circle is 3 inches too big or 3 inches too small, it doesn't matter, the intent is there. If the ritual is conducted and the banishing of evil from the quarters is done, and somebody forgets a little banishing ceremony or forgets a certain word, it doesn't matter, the intent is there. With ritual magic, it has got to be absolutely geometrically correct. The circle must be made to exactly 360 degrees. Every triangle, everything has got to be geometrically. It is a work of art to create a ritual magic circle. And it has got to be literally exact to the nth degree, or you can invite trouble. That is why I no longer practice ritual magic.
So what kind of magic do you practice now?
Magic, I mean, nowadays is basic for healing. Most of the Covenant's work is healing and helping people. In fact, the whole basis really of witchcraft is completely the opposite of the awful bad publicity in Christian press that gives us. For everything that we do good, they say we could evil. And it's just such a false premise. I mean, when they try to back it up and say, oh, but we've got confessions from, you know, Isabel Gurdy, who confessed this in 1688 or something. Yes, of course she did. You know, after a couple of red-hot irons put on her breast and pull her on the rack until every bone in the body is dislocated, she'll tell you anything you want to hear. I mean, one of the most notable and terrible cases, I think, was there was a very, very famous French torturer by the name of Sanson, and he would guarantee whatever he wanted the victim to say, he guaranteed they would say it. And one of his proud boasts was that such was the excruciating art that he had achieved. He once said, "Give me the Pope himself in my chambers for about the space of an afternoon. I swear before God that the Pope himself would confess to being a witch."
Right, wow.
Now that is frightening.
That is very
That is frightening. And everything that is alleged against witchcraft has been exalted by torture and excruciating pain. I mean, there is no semblance whatsoever, no truth whatsoever in all these confessions, which were never freely given.
So after all your sort of exorcisms that you've done, it seems that you've become quite notorious, if that's the right word. Maybe it's not.
Probably not the right word.
But you mentioned that a certain Japanese TV channel.
Oh, Kobo TV, yes, the equivalent of yes, that's quite an experience actually in its own way. Yeah, that's like Japanese BBC. Phoned up and said they'd like to do an interview and sent a camera team over to interview me. They were going to do a tour of Mysteries of Britain, and they wanted a specific program to revolve around me. And I will never forget it. The opening sequence when they first came in, they looked at it and their very lilting Japanese voice said, we come here quick, you know, Santos, him dead, Doreen Valiente, she dead, Gardner, him dead, you last old by death, we come quick, get film of you, why are you still alive?
So they came to your house?
They came to my house. It was very, very funny, because I was expecting like a usual thing I do with television, 2-man, 3-man crew, you know, sound boom, you know, and a camera and an interviewer. no more than 4 men, and suddenly looked out and there was 3 carloads and coming up there, and the whole of the clothes in showroom was full of television men and television cameras laying down cables, and it was the full McQuay.
So they came to your house then?
They came to the house, and it was quite, of course, they brought over a very famous Japanese actress, who was a serious actress, whose name, I'm afraid I cannot remember. She had a beautiful name like Maki Otani or something like this. And I remember his name, they used to call him Aiko or Makio, and I wasn't pronouncing it correct. And they filmed her on the street approaching the house. And we first had a very, very excellent gentleman who spoke fluent Japanese and English, who had been brought in by them. And I was in the street actually watching them going up to my own house. I mean, she's supposed to be coming to see me, and I was interested in what they were doing. And I was saying to them, what's translating what they're saying? And he always said, they're saying, oh, this is Makio, you know, she is now approaching the house of a famous British witch. She gets to the door, her finger goes out to the doorbell. Will she push it? She hesitates. She drops her hand. But no, she does. She rings the bell. And of course, actually, they cut the camera, you'll see. And of course, then I have to go in the house and open the door to her. And of course, inside my hallway, I've got a suit of armour. And they said, well, don't show yourself. So we want the first opening shot on the suit of armour. So I open the door, and then I could only hear these Japanese wording, and apparently said afterwards, is it the witch in a suit of armour? She jumps back in sort of pseudo-fear, you see. No, it is an ordinary set of armour. Now the witch appears, of course I come to the door. It was quite hilarious. It was completely different type of documentary to what we're accustomed to in England. It was quite hilarious.
So, and you were saying that you've just completed a book, your latest book.
Yes, I have indeed. That is called Witchcraft in Sussex.
Right.
In fact, I have 3 publishers at the moment. I haven't decided which one to run with at the moment. But I have a new book, Witchcraft in Sussex, in which I recorded a lot of anecdotes of over 50 years of experience in witchcraft, and also put down old practices that are dying out, little things in the craft that are becoming forgotten. Some of the law that's associated with trees, which people have forgotten, like justice was always meted out in Sussex. You couldn't hold a court, outdoor court, unless you held it under an elder tree. And everybody had to hold a leaf of the elder in their hand. Things like this, which is becoming history. Going out to places like Ditchling and looking into old rituals where Jacob's Post, where the old gallows was stripped away and every body had a piece of the post, and they believed it was a wonderful curative value against scrofula and the king's evil, as it was called. Practice there when Jacob the peddler was hanged there, where women would come and hold the hand of the dead man for fertility, that they may have a baby. These things are becoming forgotten. Nothing to do with witchcraft, but a lot of old Sussex law and history, which I have accumulated over, say, 50 years. And I'm now being 75, and it's not written down. And sometimes we find at coven meetings, somebody brings something up saying, good God, yes, I remember in the old days in the old covens, we always had a great big apple that was brought in. And the apple was split up and it was given a name. And a piece was buried in the earth, and all the covenanters section of this apple. These are forgotten. They're not practiced anymore. And I want to make sure they're recorded in my lifetime. And this is what is in the new book, Witchcraft in Sussex. Although it does also deal with old practices, it has the history of witchcraft in Sussex into it. And we're very lucky that we find in, let's say, between the years of 1500 to 1700, there were only 18 cases of witchcraft ever brought in the whole of Sussex in 200 years. Wow. And there's only 3 cases of the death sentence being passed. We have a lovely case in Rye where a witch with a mutch, we've tried to work out what a mutch is, we decided it was a sort of straggly beard, in which she was tried for witchcraft, found guilty, and was taken to the outskirts of the town and said, you've been found guilty of witchcraft. The district said, here is the border between Sussex and Kent. Stepped across Europe, you're now in Kent, don't re-enter Sussex. She wasn't hanged. Now, she'd been across the border in Essex. She'd been hanged from the nearest tree. In 1 week, we found in Chelmsford, in Essex, there was over, I think it was 28 witches hanged in one day. 326 witches hanged in 1 week. And over 3,000 awaiting trial in Essex. Whereas where you think that is just in 1 month, etc., or 1 week in Essex, a short period of time. And yet in 200 years in Sussex, we have only 18 cases. And time again, we have found the witches taken to the borders and don't come back. Executions did not take place. It was, again, this is one of the reasons I concentrate on Sussex. Sussex was the last bastion of paganism to fall to Christianity. It was the last county to be Christianized. And even so, long after the Christians had set foot here, the local people, populace, only paid lip service to the Christians. And the old roots, I mean, this example around Kingsfold, the Warnham area, where witchcraft was very, very strongly entrenched, where all the local farms hid the witches and looked after them. They never, Matthew Hopkins and people like that, never dared step foot in Sussex on its witch-finding crusades. They were hostile to the witch-finders.
So would you say that Sussex is still a very important place?
It is a very important place. It's a hotbed to this day. There are covens from one end of Sussex to the other, and they are growing. We're coming back.
So finally, well, that's a good note actually to sort of pass on. But you're about to tour America, maybe?
That's correct. I mean, what we call a sing for your supper job. You don't get paid for it, but they pay your fare out there. You pay your airfare, and they put you up and take you around. I'm doing 11 lectures over a 22-day period. Basically, the Americans want to know the old roots of witchcraft in this country, and I find American witchcraft has strayed so very, very much from the traditional roots of it. And I'm hoping very, very much to go back and teach them some of their common ground.
Right.
And they're very, very much looking forward to it. I mean, but the numbers of different covens, the sects and schisms that has been split into in America is quite sad to a degree. But it depends again whether you get into the Bible belts of America to other areas which are, very, very easy going. At least one thing in America, witchcraft, the Wicca, has been recognized by the state as a religion. And that is something we still have to do. A Wiccan wedding or hand fasting in America is recognized as a valid wedding, as a valid marriage. Here, if we have a hand fasting, we still have to go to and get it at the registry office before it is recognized. And that is still to come. It's one of the things we must strive for here, for our religion to be recognized by the state.
Okay, Ralph, on this beautiful full moon night, I'd like to thank you for coming in to Radio 4A and for this test card hour.
You're very, very welcome, Adrian. Anytime, pick up the phone.
Okay,
thank you very much.
You have been listening to Ralph Harvey, Britain's leading pagan exorcist, on Radio 4A, 101.4 FM. Thank you and good night.
You have been listening to the Time Travel Show on Radio 1 Berlin with Ralph Harvey and Adrian Shephard. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, we wish you a healthy and peaceful journey. Thank you for listening.
You have been listening to Radio 1 Berlin. Yeah.